Awesome. What is good? What is good? Just gonna make sure we are live on all these platforms, folks. Just wanna make sure we are live. All right, y'all. What is good? Hello. I thought it'd be fun to do a pop-up word. So I've got a question because we go deep in this world of God's Vibes over here. God's Vibes is a podcast, by the way, if you guys are not familiar. So you can subscribe to the podcast, join us. God's Vibes, anywhere you get your podcasts. We have Tune In Tuesdays, so there's a new episode every Tuesday. We also have interviews a lot on Thursdays. So you get a lot of great content that you can just binge at this point. There's about 300 episodes. So make sure to tune into that. But we are doing a pop-up word for this community today. And I've got a question. Is your ego driving you? Is your ego driving you? So this isn't a question that when you're just walking around the street or having some work conversations that people ask you, but just consider it for a second. I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't even know what that means. Well, here's the thing. Ego, in its simplest form, what I like to think is it is edging God out. Okay? So ego is this part of us that is driven to have an identity and driven to feel important. It is driven to survive and to fend for itself, okay? And it's this part of ourself that operates separate from God, which is what drives us into sin too, if you really want to go deep from a faith-based perspective. But your ego is that part of you that edges God out. All right, so just think about that. Just consider, is that part of me driving me? Because we can be driven by so many things. We can be driven by our thoughts. We can be driven by our emotions. We can be driven by our moods. We can be driven by opinions of man. We can be driven by our fears. We can be driven by the news. We can be driven by circumstances. We can be driven by the Spirit of God. We can be driven by our ego and our need to feel important. Because when we actually are driven by our ego, we don't believe that we're significant. We don't believe that we're important. We have to go prove it. Okay? And the ego does this by proving it through identifying with things. So for some people, this looks different to every person, depending on how their ego is set up. But the ego likes to identify with material things. So my house, my car, my degrees, my this, my that, right? Like all this flashy stuff, my brands, okay? The ego also likes to identify with relationship status, right? So my boo and who you're connected to and what connections you have. The ego likes to be driven by identity, okay? And how you look. So we see this a lot with Hollywood, right? Sometimes people can have this kind of figure and then it changes and they need to have this kind of figure. And whatever the wave is, whatever is the in thing, that image has to adjust to be accepted, okay? It can be driven by your belief systems and what you identify, maybe your faith backgrounds, your titles, your roles, your degrees, your certifications, your importance. Ego identifies with that, okay? And there's also characteristics. I'm just going to share a couple. I wrote them down so that I could articulate it clearly and not forget a single one. But the ego has some main characteristics so that you can distinguish what is driving me? And do I want to keep that at the wheel? Okay? So number one, ego tends to equate having with being. Okay? So when I have these things, then I can be. Until I get them, though, I can't just be. Big problem for us. So that's why the ego often identifies with material things, because when it can have these things, then it's important, then it's worthy, then it's okay. And if it can't have those things, then the whole world is falling apart. All right? The ego lives through comparison. And we know comparison is the thief of joy. So when you are constantly comparing, or even if you live on the world of social media, you are setting yourself up for misery. Every single day. You're actually feeding on it every single day. Your ego likes to compare itself with other egos. So birds of a feather flock together. That is super true. Whether your ego believes you are worthy or some status, you'll see people of similar status hanging. Whether you don't believe you're worthy, you're going to see people that believe that all around you also. Okay, so your ego compares to see how it's doing. The ego is never satisfied. It is all consuming, and your ego always wants more. It's like this monster that can never be fed. It wants more fame, more stuff, more recognition, more. It doesn't even know why it wants it. It just wants more. Okay? It's like going to the buffet. You don't even have room for it. It just wants more, though. I'm just going to keep stuffing it in. All right? The ego has a sense of self that often depends on the worth that you get in the eyes of other people. So this is where people pleasing comes from. People pleasing is driven by your ego. Okay? I need to feel important in the eyes of others. So to do that, I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to please them. And if I can't, that's the end of the world. My soul is crushed, right? Your ego needs the approval of other people to feel valued. So when we don't know that we're valuable, when we don't know when we're significant, when we don't know that we're worthy, our ego is going to make us insane. And it's going to drive us into many things that the world says are okay, but they could be totally destructive to our soul. So I'm going to ask again, now that you've got context, is your ego driving you? And if you don't want your ego to be driving you, or you crave another option, I have some good news for you. We actually have a free, totally free 3-day challenge next week. It's going to be on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We're talking about how to master your emotions. Why mastery is so important, because we live in a world of information junkies, right? Like everybody is out there going and grabbing information. They're just binging, right? But they're not digesting any of it. They're not processing any of it. And if you don't do that, you can't apply it. And if you can't apply it, you can't integrate it. You can't embody it. And if you can't do those things, you can't transform. Okay? Transformation is coming from applying knowledge in your life and getting the fruit of that applied knowledge and living in that. Okay? It's almost like the manifestation. Okay? So we can have a belief, right? For a promise. There is a promise that we can go after, but in order to have that promise, we have to transform into the person that has that promise. We become somebody different. Okay? So that happens through mastery. So it's important to master the right things that help us have and enjoy our lives now. Right? And one of the things that makes us miserable are emotions, because emotions determine the quality of our lives. Okay, so we're talking about it. We're doing it in 3 days because we are going to cover a lot of information, but we're also going to have practical implementation of that knowledge and information and coaching live. Okay, free 3-day challenge. Get in the room. All right, I'm going to have information below that you can just click on and RSVP. That's all you got to do. It is hosted in a private community. It's an app called Courage Co. So over there, we host events and masterclasses and prayer calls and small groups that are virtual and many, many other things, courses and programs. So many things that you can get plugged into, okay? So once you get into Courage Co, it's over at www.courageco.org. When you log in, you'll see a main dashboard and there's going to be an events option. When you click on that, you will see 3-day challenge, master your emotions. You can click on it, RSVP, and sync it to your calendar so you don't miss the meeting details. Okay? So get in the room. We're going to talk about all things mastering your emotions. And when it comes to having a better quality of your life, sometimes we're told we think that we just need to vacate our life, take a vacation, escape, right? Do so many things. We realize that's not working. I go on vacation and I'm miserable. I move across the country and I'm miserable. I get another job and I'm miserable. Mastering your emotions will stop the misery and it will bring power back to your hands so that you can actually have and enjoy your life in abundance to the full until it overflows now. Okay? So if that sounds like something you want to learn, get in the room, www.courageco.org, or simply click on the link below. All right, guys, I will see you inside Courage Co.